All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to another episode of Comic Book Team Up with myself and John from John's Longbox. We're just going to be talking comics tonight. I gave you the introduction for Fade to Blue there. That is the sign-up page. If you want to go and leave your email address, you'll be informed when the project goes live. John has his own campaign going right now, which is the Heroic Tales #2, and the links for both of those are in the description. We'll probably watch your trailer, John, at the midway point so that we can break them up a little bit. So just say hello to a couple of the regulars who are here. Vaz is here, Manny is here, Oscar and Zach Tan all here. Everybody got their bells on and right on time. So actually wanted to talk to you about what you're reading, John, because this is what I'm reading right now. I went back. My brother was going through my Avengers for some reason, and so it started around 162. So I started reading around 162.
Oh,
and
now you speak my language. This is it. This is so good. This is some of my favorite comics of all time. Look at that cover. Did I lose you?
No. The funny thing is that, remember you were talking about a couple of weeks ago about, you're never going to kill somebody and bring them back, but it might be, they fall off a cliff and you never see them actually die, stuff like that. This is, I think, a good example of that, because in 161, Ultron, quote unquote, kills for the Avengers, but you just learn he put them in a coma, half an issue later, right? It's a cliffhanger, but for about 5-10 pages. That's about it.
Right. I mean, I remember reading that as a kid. Ultron puts up the antennas, like the antennas, and the raise power up, and he shoots them, and they just collapse dead. But the thing is, if I remember correctly, it's the other Avengers going, "Oh my God, he killed them!" Like they're thinking in an emotional outburst. To me, that's fair. Like it wasn't like Reed Richards gave him an autopsy. You know what I mean? It's an emotional spur of the moment response to they just got blasted and they collapsed. So that and you knew that they weren't going to be dead, but at the same time, it was shocking that he just took out 4 Avengers like that. It was so good. I forget that there was like the encephaloclavicle beam or some magic science ray. It was awesome, and to the point where you were like, how are they going to beat Ultron? Because Ultron was he was crafted out of adamantium at this point, so that they couldn't beat him. It was so good. I love this series. From Avengers 150 to about 210 or so are some of the best comics you'll ever read.
Yep, agreed. That's why I was just puttering through all the stuff my brother didn't put away, and there was this stack of Avengers. Started at 162, and I said, "Okay, I'm just going to read. That's all I'm going to do." I just thought and went, "Yep." Although I don't know where my 161 is. I do have 161, but it wasn't with that pile.
Did you read 164 and 165?
No, this is one I read yesterday. As far as I got so far. No, actually, what did I say? Well, yeah, because I was reading Lab Rats and Orion, which he also took out. So, John Byrne and Walter Simonson.
That battle with Count Nefaria, Avengers 165, is my favorite single issue of comics of all time. I could act out that comic. That's how much I read it. Yeah. Just before I'm gonna do like a semi-regular show called Post-Tentious, where we get the most pretentious comics ever and discuss them. Comics that would probably appall you, RJ. So I won't describe in detail what happened.
So you're not talking like Image Comics pretentious. You're talking something else completely, right?
Oh, this was Sebastian O by Grant Morrison. Just imagine Oscar Wilde as a sociopathic assassin. Less than 3 issues. I agree with Omnipo B. This cover is awesome. This is what else do you want? All the Avengers are fighting. Wonderman is getting blasted in the face. Ultron is just laughing at them all. Thor is throwing his hammer to no effect. Black Panther's in peril. Iron Man is blasted, and I love all the little dots inside the that's George Perez drawing the cover, right?
Yeah, it's George Perez. He does the whole run,
and I think Pablo Marcos is the inker. This is so good.
This cover, it gives you a preview of the entire story. because
Yeah.
there's a subplot about Wonderman wondering if he's going to die again, and he's starting to actually question himself. And Iron Man does blast him with the repulsor rays to no effect, and Thor is just hitting him with the hammer again. This is what you're getting on the inside right here.
Yeah. Oh, I just knocked over my camera over here. Yeah. And this is written by Jim Shooter, I think. Right?
It is written by Jim Shooter. You are correct.
Yeah. What else do you want, guys? Yeah, this is it. This is the kind of comics. I know. I'm a little older than you, so I remember when this came out. These were the comics that like my parents would buy, and I would just sit in the car and be quiet. It was my parents like, buy him a comic book, shut the kid up. You think I could talk? Just imagine sitting with me in the back seat. What's that, Dad? What's that, Dad? Mom, why is that, Dad? Give the kid a comic book. So that's what this came from.
And I think I could see your inspiration for some of your scenes in Heroic Tales, because in this Avengers, what's his name? Jessica? Ultron's trying to get his bride. I think it's Jessica.
Oh, Jocasta. Yeah.
Jocasta, yeah, that's it. Anyways, so he's basically trying to get the brain of Janet Van Dyne into the body of the whatever android, and Janet Van Dyne is on a slab, and she's completely nude except for a couple of steel bars in very well placed areas.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up. Because I said in my comic, without the word balloons, you'll see in the trailer when RJ shows. For those of you who don't know what he's talking about, but there's a suggestive scene of the patriarch's wife in the shower. It's more suggestive than I had it more modestly planned, but word balloons will fix it. But you see that much skin in this particular issue. Like you said, Janet Van Dyne is nude on a thing, and it's just metallic bars keeping her there. And then the whole storyline is suggestive. Ultron is the son of Hank Pym.
It's about Oedipus. It's an Oedipus storyline. It's Jim Shooter. Jim Shooter loves his mythology.
Yes. So look up Oedipus. He wants to kill his father and claim his mother as his bride. So that's what Ultron and his ultimate quest is. He makes a android body, a robot body, Jocasta, and he's going to take Jan Van Dyne's brain and put it into Jocasta. But he did it too well, right? Isn't that what saved the day?
Yes, because basically the brain of Jocasta summons ants, which spell out words to the rest of the Avengers, tell them where they are.
Right. Yes. It's so good. It's just so good. The Avengers were helpless, and then this tied into there's little A plots, B plots, and C plots. So I think at the end of this, they kind of hinted at that Count Nefaria fight, if I remember correctly. But at the same time, they were setting up that Korvac saga.
Yep.
It was all the three stories. But each issue was a satisfying read, but it built on the next, which is what I'm trying to do with Heroic Tales. Harken. I make no bones about it. This to me is the high point of Marvel Comics around here. Oh, 163. Look at that fight with Hercules. Just look at that. I love that punch. Hercules, he hits him so hard that he's knocking over a street light and it's crumbling the streets. That is awesome.
This is the Champions. He's basically taken with the Champions in issue 163, which because Beast is also in the Avengers at the exact same time he's in the Champions. And of course, well, I don't know if they're in the X-Men right now because it's all new, all different.
No, they weren't in the X-Men because I would remember, because I was introduced to the Beast in the Avengers as a blue furry guy. And then later on, when I got some back issues of the X-Men, where Beast looked like a normal, I thought it was two different characters with the same name. Marvel has used, this is 1977 for whoever's asking.
Yep, 77.
Yeah. Missed the covers that actually seen what's inside. Your classic Avengers logo. Yeah. For my comic Heroic Tales, Renzo said, "Can I draw the cover?" I never get to draw the covers. I was like, "Of course." I never thought anybody else would draw the covers, but you. I like the interior art to match the art, but because of crowdfunding, you put additional covers for additional sales. It's no secret. That's why we do it. But he said, "What do you want me to do?" I said, "Whatever you want, as long as it fits the inside story. Like, I don't want you to draw the patriarch in space talking to a space princess. That's not representative of. I love when the cover represents what's going on." So he basically made a fight scene of what's going on in the comic. I love that. Like, of course, I had input, but I just told Renzo, "Do whatever you want." Now, did you do that with Thomas Valiant, or did you describe the cover?
Well, Renzo did the back cover for Thomas Valiant. Well, I guess it's for the Valiant Heroes, right? Because Nick does the main covers for all of them.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
But when I do stuff for Renzo, yeah, he likes to have a lot of details. So, well, actually, the back cover for the Valiant Heroes, basically, is it the Valiant Heroes? I can't remember. No, it's actually Thomas Valiant #2, which hasn't come out yet. It is a basically, I described to him this cover 186 for Avengers, and we put a little things around it, as in every subsection around the three parts has a different scene on it. So that's basically what I described to Renzo for the back cover for Thomas Valiant #2, right there with Scarlet Witch.
Yeah, I love that cover. So at this point, you would have George Perez for a couple of issues, and then John Byrne doing fill-ins, and then George. You know what I mean? Like, is it any wonder that I love this art? Oh
yeah, and
Jewel is taking an issue. A girl is kidnapped. She's about to bash the costume villain's head in with a cinder block, and then it cuts to a flashback, and it's revealed he also killed her. What comic are you talking about, Jewel?
I'm gonna go back up here. Read this. I read some Marvel comic recently. It's awful. I know I'm a DC guy, but Marvel might actually just be trash.
You talking about
that's what Wes over at the Thinking Critical is saying right now. DC is outselling Marvel, like wiping the board with them.
Yeah.
It says he read Captain America 400. What's Captain America?
So you're talking. Oh, okay, Jewel. I misunderstood you. I thought you were talking about these Avengers, but you're talking about modern Marvel comics. I can't speak on that. I quit Marvel in 2015, and I haven't went back. You know, I broke up with my girlfriend. I don't call her up for a booty call. You know, I move on. Yeah, I'm not too. You know, do I really want to read Harley Quinn Fartacula? I know DC is. I do think we turned a corner, and we might get some good comics again. I don't know. It's too late. Too late for me. You know, the girl calls you up. I'll be better next time. Fool me once. Look at that 164, 165, 166 to me is the greatest trilogy in comic books. Guys, they're like a couple of bucks a piece. Pick these up. They are so good. 164, 165. It's the Count Nefaria trilogy. And basically it's evil Superman. It's the first evil Superman. Look at that. It's evil Superman, you know? So it's how would the Avengers deal with Superman? Well, not too good. They don't do too good. And then that 167, that's the Guardians of the Galaxy.
I remember when the Guardians of the Galaxy movie was about to come out, I had all of these Guardians of the Galaxy stuff, like that issue, plus the other issues of Guardians of the Galaxy of their own. I think it was Marvel Spotlight and things. And I was thinking to myself, these are going to go up in price. And yeah, no. It's got nothing to do with those Guardians of the Galaxy at all. Not really, anyways.
Behold the Guardians. I love that. It was really, nothing really happened. It's so weird. If you read this comic, the Guardians of the Galaxy spaceship shows up. They go. They have like a little bit of punching because that's what comic book characters do when they meet for the first time. And then they work out like there was no stakes. Nothing really happened, but it's awesome. You know, it's weird. I could tell the male and female characters at a glance. Yeah, it is weird. Imagine that. Jewel, do you know exactly? You said Captain America 400. I gotta see if I even have that. I don't know. DC in the 40s was pretty based. Yeah. Well, comic books were war propaganda. You know.
I was just scrolling back here. Okay, so we're going through basically 150 to what's the bottom here? 150 to 200. You start off, you got
Kirby covers.
doing covers, and then you move into from Kirby. I think it's straight into George Perez. Yep, and then from George Perez, you go from there to John Byrne. It's
Yeah,
like, can you imagine having that today?
yeah. This is all the Korvac stuff.
Yep, right there.
And I think if you scroll up, if you go down a little bit, you get the first appearance of the Taskmaster.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. It's where is it? It's right here somewhere. There it is, right there. Plus
yes,
the
yeah. It's
infamous 197.
196 is this, but he debuted in 195. Like I think he was in like the back panel, but 196 is he's in the whole comic. Just look at that. That is such a George Perez design. And when they say like, oh yeah, Deathstroke was a ripoff, it's like, yeah, well, they were also designed by the same guy. There's the same color scheme, blue and orange. The original Taskmaster. So good.
It's really funny how a lot of these guys, George Perez, John Byrne, and who else would have done it? But basically, they take a hero from Marvel and then they go to DC and make him a villain, and vice versa.
Yeah, that's true. In this one, 197, it's a tie-in with the Shogun Warriors, which to me is kind of funny because Marvel lost the license to the Shogun Warriors, so it's like, like that bothers me. Like, don't tie in stuff like with like the Micronauts. Like there's a Micronauts X-Men miniseries, but Marvel doesn't have access to these characters anymore. So like, how does that fit in with continuity? Like, do the X-Men remember going to the Microverse and hanging out with a Croyer? Things like that. That's the kind of weirdo stuff I think about. It's important to know, do the Avengers remember readin and Dragoon and the Great Mazinga? But they do own Red Ronin because that was a Marvel character that they made up in the Shogun Warriors comics. I want to point out, you see Avengers After Hours, do you see that little panel, all the girls hugging the Beast? So that's Wonderman and the Beast going out picking up chicks. And the Beast was happy-go-lucky. He had like 14 dates and he was always talking about girls and everything. And then you go to the X-Men 5 years later and he's like, nobody understands us, mutants. It's like, dude, you were a chick magnet. You and Simon Williams were about town, like, picking up all the chicks, and then later on you're just morose and dull and boring. It's like, stop hanging out with the X-Men, Beast. It's ruining you. Go back, hang out with the Avengers. You were happy.
I never could understand the whole appeal of Wonderman, especially with his movie star and all this kind of stuff. Because as far as I could tell from his power set, he was basically energy in a husk, right?
Right.
That's all his body was a husk.
I'm glad you said that, because that to me is one of my favorite evolutions of a superhero character. So Wonderman debuted in Avengers #9, and he was Simon Williams. He was an industrialist whose business was failing, and he couldn't accept that he was a bad businessman. It had to be Tony Stark's fault. He's one of these people. It's not my fault. It must be the other people who conspired against me. This guy's comic book company is doing better than mine, so I must attack his comic book company, is the kind of thinking. So Baron Zemo and the Enchantress and Loki give this guy powers. He becomes Wonder Man, and you could now take it out on Stark Industries. And then the Avengers show up. He beats Thor. That's how powerful he is. And then he realizes, I'm the bad guy, and he turns on the Masters of Evil and then succumbs and dies. But he's dead for like 10, 15 years in real time. And then right before that first comic you showed up was like, he came back. And I love the explanation. His body was being consumed by this energy, and he was slowly transforming into energy. So now when Wonder Man Simon Williams emerges from his grave, literally from his grave, he's not matter anymore. He's energy that looks like matter. But the thing is, Simon Williams doesn't know that at this point. He thinks he's flesh and blood, and he thinks that he died and came back to life, but he didn't die. He was just in his transformation status. So he laid in that coffin all that time, aware, but couldn't move. I find that to be terrifying. So here he is, one of the most powerful beings to walk on the planet, is terrified of dying again, because in his mind, death is you lay in a coffin aware, looking at everything. You know,
That's what. Yeah, that's the subplot of 162 and 163.
yeah, and that's why he hesitates, and that's why he's. I love that. I call that a Marvel weakness. He is unstoppable, and then they literally have like this progression where he starts to realize, I don't need to eat, I don't need to sleep. You know, they even say in that Guardians of the Galaxy comic that they're wearing spacesuits to go into space, and the scientist goes, Wonderman, I don't think you need a spacesuit. So they were already hinting at this, and he says, put on a space because he's scared. You know, he doesn't. You know what I mean? Like, just because all of a sudden you're given an immortal energy body doesn't mean you're psychologically prepared to accept. I freaking love that. So to me, the idea of this all powerful superhero who's scared of dying and hesitates, I thought that was so cool. And you know, this TV series is just going to focus on, I'm an actor and I'm a Hollywood actor, and you know, he's going to be all brash and everything, and leave out all of that great character development that made Wonder Man one of my favorite Marvel characters. You know, but what do I know? You know,
He
I'm just
also there's a change for Wonder Man in those 5 issues because 168 he has his new uniform, quote unquote uniform, which is basically just a red jacket. I never liked it until it actually got to be his own series, which was like 1986, 88, something like that. That was a good series.
right. Yeah, it's funny that you said that about the costume. My buddy Mike and I, we have a thing for horrible superhero costumes. So that Wonder Man Safari jacket is one of the worst costumes ever in comic books, and I freaking love it. The next worst costume is the Atom from the Justice Society, the brown and yellow. He's got the brown girdle and the yellow hood. It is so bad, but it's great at the same time. Brown, yellow, and blue. What a horrible color scheme. But there's a couple of costumes that are just so bad. What is the ridiculous superpower that you've seen in comics? Oh, give me a second.
Ridiculous superpower. Yeah, I got to think about that one.
Pooping ice cream is probably the worst super. I know that sounds familiar. Where is that from?
Uh,
That's got to be what, a recent fetish X-Men, you know? That is what. Yeah, Zach Tan has got my back. Yeah, he's claustrophobic. A mini Superman gun is pretty. Brown and yellow is awful, bad connotations. Yeah, poop and pee. Sorry, AJ. I go right to the bottom. But
Crazy Man had a pretty bad power, if you ask me. If anybody remembers Crazy Man, basically all it would do is he would be resurrected. He'd be killed and die in horrible ways, and then he'd be resurrected.
Oh yeah, there was a DC character called Resurrection Man, but he every time he died, he would come back with a different superpower. So like, you know, like he didn't want to die because it was painful, but also like, this is a cool power, and the next time he would come back, he would have a lame power or something like that. That was pretty cool. But what is the worst superpower? I'm trying to think.
There were some pretty bad superpowers now that you talk about it with Dial H for Hero. Though those were awful.
Dial H, Dial H for Hero, for those of you who don't know, was an old DC comic, and they had these little dials, and they'd spell out Hero, and they would get a power. But the cool thing about Dial H for Hero was kids would submit a costume and a name and a power. And man, if I knew about that comic as a kid, I'm glad I didn't, because I would have sent them all my good ideas, and that means DC now owns them. You know, and I'm sure none of those kids who submitted got any royalties or anything. But yeah, some of them were bad. Man, who has? Apparently, the worst superpower in the world is not having superpowers is the best, because that's Batman, right? He has no powers, but he can beat everybody. I love that Scarlet Witch issue. That, you know, I must have put tracing paper and drew that over and over and over again. It's sexy, but it's not revealing. You know what I mean? It's so good. And this was my favorite period of Scarlet Witch. She was exploring her powers, and Jim Shooter has really come up with a consistent power set for her that they forgot about later on. Like, she didn't shoot laser beams, she didn't fly, she caused bad luck against people she didn't like, and good luck against people she did like. You know, she was a good support character. And then, you know, because she was a female with vaguely defined powers, she became all powerful. That just seems to be like a trope in comics, which is what I'm doing with Mary Sue. You know, playing with that trope. Batman
171 is the classic George Perez cover with his overdoing it for every last little piece and shard of glass there has its own picture on it.
Every shard has a different image in it. You know, he didn't copy and paste. He drew them. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure George Perez had a complex of I need to be better. Nobody thinks I'm any good. Nobody thought he was any good when he started. Right?
You're absolutely right, because he started in I think his first work was Deadly Hands of Kung Fu. He did the Sons of the Tiger backup, and you could really see the limitations on his artwork. I mean, you could see that it's going to turn into George Perez, but he wasn't there yet. And Marv Wolfman, the editor, was going to fire him and told him, you know, you got like 2 issues to get better. And George Perez got better to the point Marv Wolfman and George Perez made one of the greatest comic book runs of all time. And he says, thanks to George Perez, thanks for Marv Wolfman not candy coating it, basically told me you're going to be out of work. Your dream is over unless you get better. And that's what he did. You know, a little bit of a, you know, the truth will set you free kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it was, if I remember correctly, reading the George Perez article, he was trying to keep his apartment. That's why he had to get better. Like he was going to get kicked out of his apartment, and his girlfriend was living with him at the time, who became his wife.
The best superpower is nullified any other superpower. That's a good one.
That'd be Artie. Remember Artie and Leech?
Yeah, or Wondar. You know, that's his powers, right? You could turn off energy and superpowers. You got a lot of great comments. I'm trying to look back.
Favorite tropes in comics that aren't used very often. I use a lot of tropes. If you go there's a website called trope.com or something like that, and my comic is on there. Thomas Valiant #1 is on there for the amount of tropes I use.
Which ones? I'm blanking. I could tell you some of my least favorite tropes, but my favorite tropes, I don't know. I guess I don't recognize them as tropes if I like them, but I recognize them as tropes if I don't like the all-powerful kid. You know, whenever you see a child in a comic book, that kid's going to save the day. I hate that. I also hate the chosen one, you know, and I hate time travel to fix the problems. It's so lazy. You know, but I do like the bad guy falls off a cliff and all the superheroes stand there and go, well, the Red Skull is finally dead, until 17 issues from now when he shows up again. That I enjoy. That's so good comic book trope. I like that. I mean, I goof on it, but I do like it. Like, if you're Reed Richards, you're the greatest. You're every type of scientist. You know, Hank Pym is supposed to be what is it called to study? Entomologist or etymologist? I forget which one studies insects. An entomologist. He studies an insect studier, but now he's building robots and laser beams and you know, because if you're a scientist in comic books, you're every type of scientist. Remember, Donald Blake was a diagnostician, right? He had a clinic, and people would come in with the flu, and then later on, he's doing heart surgery. Those are, you know, you go to school to become one, and you go to school to become the other. You know, but when you're a doctor in comics, like Matt Murdock, is he a criminal lawyer? Is he an environmental lawyer? Yes, you know, he's a family lawyer. He's every type of lawyer because he's in a comic book.
That's funny because 162 or 161 that I just read, Ultron he erased Hank Pym's memory and then is using him to transfer the mind of Jenna Van Dyne over because he's a somethingologist, which basically is, I don't know, whole body doctor or something like that, system doctor. Anyways, it was like, did you just make that up? I'm not entirely sure. It could be Jim Shooter. Yeah, George. I agree with George. He's talking about George Perez was seen as a bad artist back in the day compared to today. Yeah, he was dealing with a lot of old stuff, like the illustrators from he was trying to imitate Buck Rogers and all that kind of stuff. The real illustrators. They weren't sequential artists; they were illustrators.
Yeah. Leonidas says, I hate Franklin Richards. I hate the idea of having a pocket god. Yeah, I think they went overboard with Franklin's powers. I think they should be more well defined. Otherwise, it's it's the plot power, and I hate plot power. Although Mary Sue kind of has plot power, but that's also the point. Just the heroes not wanting to take responsibility for the fate of the village. Yeah, I know. Like the Red Skull falls into the cliff. Don't you think they would search the water? You know, that's such a okay. He tried to take over the world. He's a Nazi. He's going to poison the water supply, but he made it to the East River, so therefore, by the rules, he gets away. I hate evil.
Pedro, yes, evil Superman is a trope at this point. It is one of the tropes on trope.com for my book because Blue Sky is a Superman trope. He's the evil Superman trope.
I got to look up trope.com now. I'm really intrigued.
I think it's trope.com. I think. I can't remember. It was like when Thomas Valiant came out, I was Googling it to see if anybody put it up on anything. And yeah.
Yep. Cool. I'll check that out later. Thank you. He has a doctorate in Scientologism. He has a PhD in horribleness.
They didn't know anything about all this stuff. They had reference material. That's what they had. They had shelves of reference material. Back in the day, we didn't have the internet. You had shelves of reference material.
Yeah.
Why I collect dictionaries.
It's funny that you say that because, Jack Kirby was in World War II. And then Jack Kirby would draw World War II comics, and they had guns that just weren't real. You know what I mean? But it was amazing, and it was fun. It was cool because Jack Kirby just had this way about him, and he had this dynamism and action, and it is so that you forgave a lot. Now, like a lot of these boring artists of today, I'm not going to forgive them if the car doesn't look like a car. A tank in a Jack Kirby comic looked like, this unbelievable, unearthly machine, but it was just a tank. But it was freaking cool, because he made it look cool. Does that make sense? Am I talking nonsense?
No, you're not talking nonsense. I remember Kumandi. He couldn't even draw a fish correctly. There's like one of the Kumandi covers where they drained all the water out of the ocean, and there's these fish lying in the bottom of the ocean. It's like, that's not a fish. Do you not know how to draw a fish? No, that's a Kirby fish, right?
Yeah, because he was in the basement by himself with no reference. You've seen that picture of Kirby, at his art desk, and it looked like he was being punished. Draw. We'll tell you when you're done.
That'd be his wife.
To get back to what we were talking about, I'm writing a story set in Revolutionary War times, so I'm just gonna write out the dialogue the way it is, and then I'm gonna, I'm not gonna worry about making it sound like colonial war times until after the story's done. And then I'm going to go back and change it. Does that make sense? So I'm going to put it in like research and look up the words, make sure I don't use anachronisms, stuff like that. So this is a lot of work. And my artist is already gathering reference data, to draw these muskets and the things that are in this, like a printing press. The name of the character is the Printer's Devil. He's an apprentice printer that I don't want to give away the spoilers. So he's looking up how to draw these things. So it's a lot of work. At the same time, another guy's like, I have a character that's a comic book character set in Silver Age world. So it's supposed to be hokey. That one's a breeze to write. Who cares if it looks right? You know what I mean? It's supposed to be DC in the Silver Age. So when this superhero picks up a machine gun, who cares what it looks like? Because the Silver Age DC care about it? The war comics did, but I'm talking about like the Justice League at the time with Gardner Fox. They didn't care about realism. So that's like no sweat. If you know what I mean, but a historical piece. So when you're talking about artist tropes and things are difficult, they didn't care. I don't, now I think there's more of a demand on a comic book than there was when you get. Is that a good thing that we demand more, or is it like, hey, it's for kids? Who cares? I don't know. That's for each individual person. Look at this.
I think it's really stylized, depending on who's actually doing it, right? But at the same time, I go down rabbit holes. Doing Fade to Blue is like, can I use, because I want to use basically idioms from the 1930s and 20s, right? So I actually, when I think of something that I want to use, I actually go look it up, see if it was actually an idiom before that point or not, whether or not they can actually say it. I just go down rabbit holes of whether.
Well, you're setting your comic fade to blue in the 40s or the 30s.
No, it's 1929, 1930.
Right. So yeah, so you don't want to use words like internet, and words that just don't exist, and they're not going to have cell phones. You know what I mean? It's hard to do that.
Yeah, because I was looking up, like I thought to myself, one of the things he was going to say is, "Are you on the level?" And I was thinking, is that an old expression or not? And I had to go look it up, and basically, it's a Freemason
Right.
reference. So
yeah, are you on the level? It's a way of asking, are you a Freemason? Yeah. Yeah. I think that predates the 30s. Look at this. Look at that machinery that the collector is using. There's no machinery that looks like that, but it's freaking cool. I love looking at like the 70s, and then it's like Commandy is a perfect example, or OMAC. It was written in the early 70s, but it's supposed to be set in like the year 2025, like what people of the past thought the future was going to look like. I love that stuff. it's like so like charming. It's like, oh, you think we're going to progress?
Actually, I always say, I think I said this on a live stream a couple of weeks ago, but the OMAC stuff is a dystopia that I think we see coming right now. Because I was going with the rage rooms. He had these rage rooms and all these,
Yep.
and the AI and the robots, basically the robot women and all that kind of stuff. I was thinking, yep, there you go. That's like 2025 right there.
I said that many times at OMAC. It's only 8 issues, and they're not really that expensive. And I think you can get them all collected. And if you get them all collected, you get the unpublished 9th issue. But it is Jack Kirby at his most prophetic. Without a doubt, that is the most prophetic. It is eerie how prophetic each issue is. And that was like 73, 74.
Flying cars, yes. Well, I remember Back to the Future too. What, it's set in 2018 with the flying cars?
Yeah.
No, we don't have flying cars yet.
I just got a private message from Room Full of Love. Should I accept it? I don't think so. Sorry, Room Full of Love. Sorry. I'm a married man. Flattered, but thank you. No. What does Oscar say? Oscar is the colorist on my comics, and he's also doing the art for Eddie is Doom. So I always like to see what he says. Easy now. I used to have a box with a lot of pictures from newspaper magazines for reference. J.C. Penney. Oh yeah, you actually had physical stuff for reference. Like Chuck Dixon was talking about. He set a story. I think in the Korean War, and the artist started drawing World War II planes, and Chuck Dixon was like, I can't accept this, So he actually went and bought a book about airplanes from the Korean War and mailed it to his artist, and the artist was very appreciative. Yeah. Nowadays, there's really no
mother boxes, but modern cell phones.
Yes.
There you go.
Yes. There's really no excuse for not having reference today. I mean, everybody, we have the, I always say this, we have the sum total of all human knowledge right here in our hands. There's really no excuse not to know what something looks like if.
Well, I think, quite honestly, the whole reason for that, someone asked a question a little bit ago. I'm not sure who it was, Leonidas maybe, but I think it's time for Jack Kirby to come back, as in a Jack Kirby style. There's so much reference out there, and you could just go too far in that direction with the literal and everything else, because we have it, and there's AI and everything else that just gives you an exact copy. No, it's time for artists to actually do what Jack Kirby did and have a style, and that style doesn't need to be literal. I think that is the way that you can tell. I mean, how can you tell if a comic is, it's going to come to a point where how can you tell whether a comic is actually drawn by AI or not? Well, it's going to be whether or not they have a style.
Yeah, I'm reaching over here because I can't find it, but there's a comic called Jupiter by Jason Sandberg that is unapologetically Jack Kirby style art. It's what he's going for. I recommend that. So
Or Mike Mignola.
Mike Mignola, I wouldn't call him Jack Kirby, but he is definitely stylized, and he's instantly recognizable. To me, he is just as recognizable as Jack Kirby. Have I ever considered using Ingram Spark to get your comic books to Ricos by printing them as soft and hardcover books? No, this is the first time I'm ever hearing about it. I don't know. Never heard of this.
Me either.
I only have one comic. So right now I'm trying to get like 3 or 4 comics. And then I'm talking with somebody who's putting me in touch with somebody. I'm keeping it vague on purpose about going to a publisher and getting comics made. He said that they would like it. But everything's on hold until we find out what's going on with Diamond. You know, is there going to be a comic book industry in the future? If not, we'll try something else. And I'm being vague on purpose because whatever.
George, you were talking about the Korean War and the U.S. War. That's one of the things that you gotta forgive even movies for, because a lot of those movies, especially in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, they use modern technology for like tanks or stuff like that. If you watch Patton, most probably, or something like Kelly's Heroes, you're not actually going to get very period specific like tanks for the Tigers and things like that. I think they use modern tanks and they just substitute them because there's no way they're going to get 4 Tigers, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't know. I'm not an expert on that. On those. I'm sure every war movie, like if you make a war comic, there are guys that will criticize everything to the point. I have a character called Sergeant Stone, and he was a World War II sergeant. He got shot, fell into the Rhine River, and the Rhine maidens rescued him, and he was beyond time and space for a while. And when he came back, he was a stone being, and he's carrying an AK-47, which is not a World War II gun, and it's not even an American gun. But Renzo was like, I don't know guns, and I'm like, I'm not going to ask you to change it because it's 40 years later that he emerges. He would have picked up a gun laying around, kind of thing. But I'm sure somebody somewhere is going to be like, John doesn't know what he's talking about. That's not a World War II gun. You know what I mean? So when you do, like, I'm real nervous about this Revolutionary War era comic. I don't want to make an embarrassing mistake. So.
It was like the fact that one of the first splash pages that Renzo did for Thomas Valiant was a guy taking a picture, which was something that looks like a cell phone. And I thought to myself, I don't have cell phones in my world. They haven't advanced that much in technology because of the warp, basically the warp fields around the cities and things like that prevent long distance communication. But I thought to myself, I thought to myself, he could still have it. You don't have to take it out, Renzo, because I'm thinking back to the 80s with the disc cameras, and it looks like a disc camera. Like a modern cell phone looks like a disc camera.
Okay. That's it. I didn't know that about your world. But then again, like, it's not a good thing to... I was going to do that. My first issue of Heroic Tales was just going to be world building the comic. And then I realized, I was told, I don't care about your comic because I don't care about any of your characters, because it's like being given the Similarian and go, here. You're like, so I streamlined it down to one character. So yeah, I'm still finding out stuff about your world, and I probably know more about your world than anybody else because we talk about it behind.
Well, it's not a thing I've even put down as, like, it's not even in dialogue. It's just that it happens over and over again. When somebody tries to contact someone from far away, they lose the signal, right? And that's why in Kid Fox, they use the sonotubes, because they're going across town and there's no other way to get a message from one place to the other. I never actually come out and say it, but there's a use for old technology.
Oh, okay. I like that. I think an honest way need to remind it if there's I'm just reading all the comments. You got good comments in chat. I hope John's Revolutionary War comic doesn't ruin my childhood. No, it won't. I'm proud of the story. I got all the story beats written. I'm just working on the structure of how I want to tell it. So I want to get it to my artist this weekend. But that, since it's a period comic, I'm really nervous about it. The other comic is kind of goofy, the Silver Age DC type story. Even if we make a mistake, we're going to be like, well, if Gardner Fox would have made a mistake, it was planned to be a mistake. I have an out already. Kelly's Heroes is a great movie. Yeah, I love Kelly's Heroes. One of my favorite war movies.
It's one of the war movies. I don't know um, if it's this way where you are, John. You're in New York, so you have access to so many things. But around here, the only thing that I can really buy, even at yard sales and things like that, is war movies. Right? They keep on putting out war movies, like older war movies. I can't get old black and white movies or film noir or things like that. But if I want war movies, yeah, go to a store and I could find them. Sand Pebblers or Kelly's Heroes or the Dirty Dozen, anything like that, right?
Yeah, I just used to. It was just like a Sunday thing. I'd wake up, we'd go to church, we'd come home, have like a big breakfast, watch Abbott and Costello, and then it was war movies with my dad. So like especially like during the winter when it was cold. During the summer, you go out and play. Does my comic involve the Hessians? My comic is set during the Articles of Confederation, and that's it's set May 20th, because May 25th is the Continental Congress. So it's a week before the Continental Congress, and people are trying to disrupt the Continental Congress from happening because they believe that these people are overthrowing. We just went through a war. I was shot. I have a piece of lead still on my body, and now we have the Articles of Confederation. It's not perfect, but it's better than the King's rule. And now you want to overthrow this because you're the tyrants. So the bad guy is trying to save the Articles. He's trying to save the Confederacy. Does that make him a bad guy? Well, to our way of thinking, yes. But to his way of thinking, he's a patriot, because he doesn't have a lantern into the future. He doesn't know. He thinks that James Madison and all these people are going to make a new king, and the whole Civil War or Revolutionary War is going to be a waste. So I kind of like that. The bad guy is not really a bad guy, really.
I want to address this comment with Jewel talking about all white people. The funny thing, Jewel, he is my colorist. I think he's in the Middle East. I have no idea. He has a Middle Eastern name, and I don't think English is his first language. But I have no idea where in the world he's at. But he makes choices about how to color people's skin. I'm just like, yeah, I'll go with it. I don't care.
Right. Yeah. I for background characters, I don't tell Renzo. He'll ask me, is this, there was one scientist, and he says, is this some scientist important? I said, no, he's just there to deliver some information, whatever you want to draw, and then there's one doctor, so I got the comic back, and I'm like, oh, cool. The doctor's a black guy. This scientist is a nerdy looking ginger. Renzo, I trust him. And you work with Renzo, and he's a phenomenal artist, and he has different body types, and he could draw anything. So, let the artist do what they want to do. You know what I mean? It's like, why micromanage all the stuff? I got my main characters the way they look, and I thought I'd share this. My wife just sent me a picture. She names all the raccoons. Meet Penelope. Penelope's on my porch right now. There you go. RJ, I'm sure you got raccoons by where you live.
Yeah, raccoons are a bane of my existence. Whenever it gets dark out here, I gotta reduce my speed in my car by about 20 miles an hour
Look at
in order
Penelope.
to not
So cute.
kill myself.
Penelope, don't go near RJ's house. Don't go to RJ's house. Stay over here. We got plenty of cat food. We feed the ferals, and when the ferals leave, the raccoon shift comes in.
I was coming home about an hour ago. I almost hit a raccoon, two rabbits, and a pheasant.
A pheasant. There was a storm last summer, a bad storm, and when it was a Saturday night, and I woke up early on Sunday, and there was deer on my lawn. There's no, I live in a suburb. I say the country because I'm comparing it to when I lived in the five boroughs, but there was just a deer, like all scared looking, like it was definitely lost or confused by the storm. I felt bad for it, But we had a big old hawk eating squirrels in the tree in my backyard, and me being a stupid, I'm living in this house for like a month, and there's a big hawk just eating a squirrel, and I come running out to look at it, and the hawk is like looking at me like, and I'm like, oh my god, this thing is big. Oh my god, it views me as a danger. Like I'm just such a goofy city boy. I was like, all right, I'm Mr. Hawk. I'm backing up slowly, and you can see the hawk like relaxing, but it was huge, scary looking up close.
That's funny. I went for a hike about 2 weeks ago, and I came around a turn because I was out by myself, and I saw a wild turkey. They released wild turkeys here about 10 years ago so people could hunt them. First time I've ever seen one, and it's like half my size.
Yeah, turkeys are big and they're ugly. And Jules Escawhipper, I used to live in Flushing, Queens. I moved during the COVID because everybody was. If I'm going to be locked in, I didn't want to be locked in a one. I didn't know how long it was going to last. I didn't want to be locked in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I was like, all right, if we're going to be locked in, let's get a house. You know, best move I ever made. You know, we got raccoons in the backyard. I love them. Cats. We got a rabbit. Just I see this rabbit like 3 days a week. Just like as I'm going to work at 4:15 in the morning, I'm driving to the train. This rabbit just hanging out on the lawn. You know, I guess it learned how to survive.
I got my patio up and running, which I put a screen around it last year, so there's no bugs coming in. So I'm spending a lot of time out there now, and the rabbits are everywhere around. Like you never notice them when because they're so quiet, right? You never notice them when they're just jumping through your lawn. But when I'm out there just working in silence and things like that, it's like rabbits everywhere.
Yeah. If you just don't move a long time and they either forget about you, they'll show up. Yeah, my backyard's pretty neglected, and we spent all the money fixing up the inside of the house. So the backyard, we don't go in the backyard. There's an old wooden deck that's fallen apart. It's kind of dangerous, actually. So John is crazy. We have chickens. Such coons are generally shot on sight. Yeah, well, I don't have chickens, but I understand. I remember it's funny because my friend's now his wife, but when they were dating, she lived where I'm living now, not in this house, but in the same town. And they had a big yard with vegetable gardens. And the father used to sit in the backyard with a BB gun and drink beer and shoot like gophers and little varmints, to keep him out of his garden. And I thought he was just the biggest ass. And now I understand where he's coming from,
That's funny. It's like one of my friends, when they incorporated a town that he was living in that wasn't too far from where I was living when I was a kid, and his father had horses and cows, and it's like, you got to get rid of those. You can't have those in town now.
And Jules says, "Oh, you used to live in Asia." Yeah, there's a reason. Mary Sue, my character, is a Chinese girl from Flushing, Queens, and I actually know the street corner where she works and everything like that. Yeah, I love downtown Flushing, but COVID closed all the restaurants. Like when I go there now, all my favorite restaurants. I'm sure there's other restaurants that are just as good, but I don't know them anymore. It's like it's like a windshield wiper. They just wiped everything away and then reset it. So it's not what I remember anymore. Including their powers, careers, enemies, tragedies, and personal life. Which heroes would you want to live? Who would I want to be? Superman.
Yeah, that's right? What I was about to say.
Why not? You're going to be this good-looking, immortal guy with cool powers that everybody loves.
And I could do his job too because I do research really well. So I could be a reporter.
He struggles once every 20 years when sales are low. I can deal with that. And when Lois Lane gets old and dies, you got Wonder Woman. So yeah, there's no other choice to me. As much as I love Ben Grimm, I don't want to be Ben Grimm.
That's one of the if you remember when they started putting out Nightwing as its own independent series, the very first issue was Nightwing saying to himself, yes, I have these powers. Yes, I could be Batman if I wanted to. I was trained to be the next Batman, but who wants to be Batman?
Right. Yeah. Batman is a miserable existence. Superman's got it all. Let me ask you, I was talking with friends the other day, RJ. Would you consider Superman a Mary Sue?
Not the way Jim Shooter describes him. That's the whole point. He's supposed to be Sir Galahad. Right. And Sir Galahad is, as far as I'm concerned, Jim Shooter has the definitive definition of Superman because he wrote him for so long, right? And he wrote him in a time where he was transformational. But as Sir Galahad, he's supposed to be a paragon above paragons. That's not to say he's not a man. It's not to say that he's not, what do you call it? I don't know. It's like immaculate conception or whatever it is. It's not like he's without sin, right?
I love Superman. He's my favorite comic book character. It's funny because now that I'm thinking about it, all my I love Captain Kirk, uh, and Captain Nemo, or like and Odin. And I would say, except for Captain Nemo, I think they're all Mary Sue's. So I don't necessarily think of. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Mary Sue is like a derogatory term for a character that's perfect at the beginning, so therefore there's no story arc. But I but like Superman is perfect, but that's the whole point of him. Captain Kirk, like he's more logical than Spock. I mean, Captain Kirk like talks computers into destruction with logic foo, and then he seduces all the ladies. He's kind of, Spock is there to be logic on one side, Bones is emotion on the other, and Kirk is like the perfect balance. But so I don't necessarily think of Mary Sue as a bad thing. I think that's just hit the ground running, except that Superman is perfect. And then but he's also fully human. If anybody's Christian, the mystery of Christ is fully God and fully human. Like, if you write Superman as super, I think you're gonna make a boring comic. And if you make Superman as man, you're gonna make a bad comic. You got to make him as fully super and fully man. Like, he's got to have like an internal conflict. Like, yeah, Superman doesn't want to wake up and save the day, kind of thing. And like, Superman is tempted to use his powers in a destructive way, but then he realizes that would be wrong. Otherwise, he's dull. But anyway,
I was just thinking about it, and I never thought of it in these terms before, but as heroic. And there's a choice to be made and a realization that needs to be made in order for you not to be Mary Sue. And I think for DC characters, the realization is that I'm not always right, but I can still do whatever. Whereas for Marvel characters, I realize that sometimes I can be right. You know what I mean? There's a way big difference, but there's still a realization there.
Right. Caliph Knight says, John, you're among disgruntled nerds. We know what a Mary Sue is. Yes, but I also subscribe to the Jim Shooter method of be as inviting as possible. There's one person who doesn't know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? So, but yes, I know. And but like, if Superman has no conflict even internally, then he's a boring character. You know what I mean? Like, one of my favorite issues of Superman, I think it was written by Marv Wolfman and drawn by Jerry Ordway. It was during the John Byrne. If you remember, John Byrne did Superman, and then Jerry Ordway did the Adventures of Superman, and he's fighting Brainiac, one of the many incarnations of Brainiac. And this Brainiac was just like a carnival mentalist who started using mental powers, and he kind of got Superman when he was distracted. And then Superman was just like, do you know what you almost did? He goes, every day I wake up and my first thought is I could fix the world. I could take over the world and make it perfect. He goes, and then I don't, because I'm Superman, and I realize that would be wrong, and I have to let humanity go their own way. He goes, you almost messed up my will. You know what it takes to stop my impulses? You know what it takes to stop the impulses of a Superman? The will of a Superman. And you almost broke that balance. And I thought that was such a tremendous speech by Superman to show you that he's not above temptation. You know what I mean? He is fully man. He's Superman. I thought that was so good. So good. Because if you just have Superman as this perfect being, that he's almost an android, and that's he's just a program or whatever. Yeah, you got to have some sort of Adam Lawson just says hello everybody. Adam Lawson says hello everybody. But anyway, I realize I'm talking too much on your channel.
No, that's no problem. I'm just actually looking at these Avengers covers, and I'm amazed at how many times Mjolnir just has zero effect. Thor is throwing it against something and it does nothing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's the I call it the solo versus team paradox. If you're reading a Thor comic book, Thor is going one-on-one versus Ego, the Living Planet, or the Celestials, or Galactus. But Thor's now in Avengers 202, and he's having a hard time with Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, and the Vision fighting the Great Gargoyle. You know what I mean? It's just, there's solo Thor and there's team Thor. I love that drawing of the beast right there, that muscular back. That is so cool.
Pedro says, OJ, you think it's necessary to have some kind of trauma to want to be a hero, or it takes to make a normal person forced to be a hero? You can go either way. You don't have to pick one. You can have both at the same time. I think normal people are heroic in the fact that, just like John was saying, to wake up and have a heroic will, that's something in itself, and a lot of people do it every day. So you can have everyday heroes.
Well, you mentioned this a few times. You actually changed my mind in your Saturday videos. For those of you who don't know, RJ does serious videos on Saturday. Then he slums it with me on Wednesdays. But you talked about, like, Kamala Khan. She was made without pathos. She was made without trauma. And as of yet, they haven't made a story that people talk about with this character. Everybody who's slightly into comic books talks about Peter Parker's origin. To me, that's Peter Parker's Spider-Man's origin is got to be the most perfect comic book story ever written. He's on his villainous path. He's this selfish, self-absorbed, angry at the world kid, maybe for legitimate reasons. And then he gets power, and the first thing he thinks about is exploiting that power. And then through his own arrogance, he could have stopped something and he didn't want to, and now his uncle dies. And that teaches him, oh my God, I need to, with great power comes great responsibility. One of the greatest lines in all of comic books. It's almost a Shakespearean quote, and it comes from Stan Lee, and it's great. It is perfect. It's better than Superman's origin. It's better than the Fantastic Four. It is the greatest, but he has a tragedy in his life, and now Spider-Man is now motivated through redemption and guilt. It's so perfect. What does Kamala Khan have other than she was given powers? And that's one of the reasons why I don't like most of the X-Men. Most of the X-Men were given beautiful physiques and cool powers. And then what? You know what I mean? Like, that's why in my comic book, you kind of won't see mutants. Because, that's boring. You were born with powers. It's almost like that rich kid. Oh, I don't want to write a comic book about Paris Hilton, spending money. You know what I mean? I'd rather read a book about, a Tesla who started out poor and through inventions became wealthy and then gave it up again. You know what I mean? That's interesting. It's a really good quote. Probably the only positive thing Stan Lee ever contributed. Jewel. Oh man, no Stan Lee hate over here.
I was thinking of something as you were talking, John, and it's completely gone out of my mind. But you're absolutely right about the Kamala Khan. No, that's what it was. The Kamala Khan thing. It's the fact that being a part of what is it? Basically the way that they write heroes, quote unquote, right now, especially in Marvel, but DC as well, is that if you're part of a marginalized group, that's your heroism. Yeah. Because you lived as part of a marginalized group. That's your heroism right there. And that's why even the Brave New World, the Captain America movie that just came out, is like, is he a hero or not? I mean, does he deserve to be Captain America or not? Well, he deserves to be Captain America because of the color of his skin. That's it. Right? I mean, he's a hero in his own right, sure. But does he deserve to be Captain America? That's another question.
You know what word I hate most in the English language? By far, my most hated word in the English is deserve. Nobody deserves anything. If you want to quote me, you deserve shit. That's my quote. Nobody deserves anything. Nobody deserves. The only thing you deserve is to be left alone. Everything else has to be earned. You know what I mean? Or stumbled upon or whatever. But nobody. I hate, like, like you get that coworker and it's just like, I'm gonna have this cupcake. I deserve it. It's like, no, you don't. You don't. Nobody deserves a cupcake. What did you do to deserve a cupcake? You know what I mean? Like, did you end the war? No, you want the cup, eat the cupcake. You don't need a reason to justify a cupcake. You know what I mean? Deserve is just like the most overused word. I hate that word. Exactly. People over. All right, I got Zach Tad in my core. Everybody else thinks I'm a jerk. You know what I mean? Wow. I want a day off. I deserve a day off. No, you don't. You got to go to work. Houses don't build themselves. You know what I mean? Nobody deserves a day off. You take a day off. You want a day off. You know, I'll even accept you earned a day off, but nobody. Who decides? That implies that the universe is a judge. That there's karma. You know what I mean? It's like a religious word. You know, like you open up that box and you're like, I'm going to eat this potato chip. I deserve it. It's like, okay, like is there a, like yes, religious people believe in God, but I'm talking about like the progressives who are above religion, but they have this concept of deserve, which means karma, which means like an intelligence behind the universe. There's a lot of weight behind the word deserve, and nobody deserves a cupcake. There you go. I'll put that on a t-shirt. Heroic Tales, when I have my website up, the first t-shirt is nobody deserves a cupcake.
I always do things like that, John. I have a list, I'm sure, somewhere on my computer. I can't remember what it's under right now, but I think of fun lines that I have to work into conversation somewhere in my books.
My wife is yelling. I think she's listening and criticizing me. Yeah, nobody deserves a cupcake. Yeah, I have to work that in. I have a few lines that I want to work into comics. Yeah, you're smarter than me writing them down. There's so many lines that I'm sure I forgot. I don't even remember that I forgot them. Supervillain power, deserve. He says it, he got it. Yeah. Deserve really is it's an entitled word. And I know most people don't mean it in the way that I'm explaining it, but like it's my buddy Mike that I've mentioned a few times that, we read these comics together, but that's like, I think somebody would say they deserve something, like from across the room, he'll look at me and like, I know, nobody deserves anything. You deserve to be left alone. You deserve the right. Oh, my wife just sent me a message. I deserve a cupcake because I stayed married to you. I love that Absorbing Man comic. That's a 2-issue story of the Absorbing Man. That art is just phenomenal. I think that is the first time I was just floored by the artwork in a comic. And of course, it's John Byrne. It's so good. And it's a really creepy story. Anybody reading that story now, I don't want to spoil it, but there's some questionable stuff in that comic, and you could see the hint of it on the cover. The Absorbing Man just grabs a girl at the restaurant and abducts her. He deserved that girl. But I love that. Iron Man could take out the Absorbing Man if the Absorbing Man was in an Iron Man comic. But since he's an Avengers comic, it takes Captain Marvel, or Miss Marvel, rather, the Vision, Iron Man, Hawkeye, the Beast. You know what I mean? That's the rule of solo versus teams on display right there.
It's also the rule, I think, 70s and 80s Marvel, I guess more 70s, with the Wrecking Crew. It's like, yeah, let's build a superhero or supervillain team out of guys who have construction tools, right?
It's funny. I think of that every day. Like, there's a tool that we use called a lump hammer, and every time I grab the lump hammer, it's just a big heavy hammer. For sometimes you just got to bang a pipe into place or something like that. You can't use a monkey wrench; that'll ruin the monkey wrench. So you have a lump hammer. It's boom. And every time I take one, I think of the Wrecking Crew. Why isn't there a member of the Wrecking Crew just called Lump Hammer? They're all this pile driver. There's Wrecking Ball, the Wrecker, and then they should be like the dumb guy in the background. I'm Lump Hammer. Crowbar,
Yes, magical crowbar.
Yeah. It's such a thing a child would think of, or a blue collar guy. One ninja. Zach Tanner's got it right. One ninja is a threat. A gang of ninjas is just they might as well be the Keystone Cops, right? We all know that, the ninja rule. Daredevil sees one ninja. Daredevil's like, uh-oh. Daredevil sees 100 ninjas. It's just, they might as well be those, what are they, the Stap Trooper droids from the sequel Star Wars,
Not to give it away, but that's one of the tropes, I guess we'll say, in Thomas Valley #2. You start off with a whole bunch of ninjas, but you learn that there's not a whole bunch of ninjas. It just looks like there is because there's only a couple of ninjas, and they're using basically technology to project the fact that it looks like there's more than there are.
Yeah. Yeah, the Wrecking Crew got their powers from the Enchantress. The Loki and the Enchantress, I think, made a magic powered crowbar, and it was originally the Wrecker. And then I think the second time he shared that power with the Wrecking Crew. So I don't know if that diminished his power or what, but that's the Wrecker. So he was originally just a guy with a crowbar.
Although Absorbing Man had, I'm not sure, because he has his own powers besides the fact that he has the Wrecking Ball, because he can become basically whatever he touches.
Yeah, the Absorbing Man also got his powers from Loki. Loki gave him the powers. So like Loki was, it was just like I don't know if it's a trope or whatever, but Loki was just manufacturing villains to plague Thor for a while. And I love the Absorbing Man. We all have one of those characters that we just feel very protective of. And the Absorbing Man to me is just one of the coolest concepts ever. I love the Absorbing Man. I'm so glad that he hasn't really been ruined by the MCU movies.
Hey, he's too blue collar for that. For one.
Yeah. Look at that. He absorbs the engine's turbines. And he becomes hot, he becomes steel, he becomes gigantic. Look at that cover. That is awesome. Yeah. And then the next issue, 185, it leads into the culmination of who are Wanda and Pedro, which I'm not joking. At this point, it's like an 8 or 9 years of drip release storytelling in X-Men and the Avengers, and they finally, and there was like, I'm sure they went over here, then editorial changed it over here, or the writer changed it, but it all worked together into one tidy, complicated but tidy story that I absolutely loved, all the little nuances and everything. This story of Wundagore Mountain and who the Scarlet Witch is, this is the kind of stuff that I love. These issues are just chock full of comic book lore. They're so good. And then
15 years since they actually first appeared in Avengers.
Right. Oh man, it's so good. And then to top it off with this beautiful John Byrne artwork. I always felt bad for Jean Grey and the Scarlet Witch. They just seemed like they were all the Marvel guys were just like, I'm just going to treat her the way I wish I could treat my ex-girlfriend who broke my heart. Like these girls just went through unbelievable horror. Jean Grey and Scarlet Witch, poor girls. Yes, the Absorbing Man appeared live in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series, and they didn't do a bad job. The only thing is they made it so that when he absorbed materials, it almost like got him high. That I didn't particularly like. But it was a nice twist, but I could have done without that. But overall, they did him pretty good. The actor looked just like him. It was a perfectly cast actor rather.
One of the early, I can't remember what it is. I think it was probably the second Hulk movie that came out. They sort of gave Zat the powers of Absorbing Man.
Yes, yeah. He was the Absorbing Man at the end. Yeah. What was his name? The actor's name. Why can't I think of his name?
Gary Busey.
Not Gary Busey, but he's the guy that looks like Gary Busey. He's the non-crazy version of Gary Busey.
Right.
I mean, he also played Jackson Pollock in that Woody Allen movie. Why can't I? He's got that gravelly voice. But yeah, I could see why he was basically playing Gary Busey in that movie. Yeah, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was a good show until I stopped watching it after they fought Graviton the next season when they killed off Coulson and then brought him back from another dimension. I was like, I can't stand this. If you're going to kill off a character, commit to the bit. Is the dumb pretty girl still a trope? I can't remember the last time I saw one. I can't think of a dumb pretty girl in comics anyway. I think they're too scared to do that. Caliv asked, did I see the Earth's Mightiest Heroes cartoon? That is one of the best comic book cartoons ever. Oh my God. Their version of the Wasp in that cartoon is my favorite version of the Wasp. And I'm a stickler. Like, I want things to be right out of the comics. And even I think that she's different than the comics, but she's the best version of the Wasp. Have you ever seen that, Earth's Mightiest Heroes?
I haven't.
It is the best best Avengers cartoon by far. This one over here, 188, The Elements of Doom. I think that was an inventory issue.
Yeah, those are most of the ones around here are one shots.
Yeah, I think these were inventory issues. That picture of Hawkeye, you could actually feel the indentations because I put tracing paper over it and drew it over and over and over again to the point my cover has like a braille, like a Daredevil would be able to read the cover. Yes, I love this. This was so good.
Back in the day when you had John Byrne doing fill-in issues.
I know. Look at this. Look at these covers. Now that 190 and 191 are so good. Look at that. I love that monster design. That is such a cool. I basically have a rip-off monster that looks like that in a issue 4 of Heroic Tales. But that's the way I describe it. Let's see what Renzo actually draws. There's a monster in the Heroic Tales #2 that technically Renzo followed my directions, but what he imagined from those words is a whole lot cooler than what I wrote. So when I got the script, I was like, this isn't what I. Oh my God! But it is actually the words, but interpreted differently. So I'm happy. He doesn't have to change anything. It's awesome, but we'll see.
This run of Avengers is the reason why I hate what they did to Carol Danvers.
Oh yeah.
To me, this is Carol Danvers right here. Not the old stuff with its feminism, not the new stuff where they have all this. You can't tell her whether she's a man or a woman. This is Carol Danvers' stories right here, Avengers.
Yeah, this is my Miss Marvel. Yeah, it's such a cool, sexy costume. She was powerful. She was a go-getter. She was in the front line of every fight, and at the same time, she had a sense of humor. You totally believe that she was an Air Force military person, because I haven't met any Air Force military person or any branch in the military that didn't have like a self-deprecating sense of humor and was good with the quips. You know what I mean? Like when you hang out with rough people, you develop this ability for repartee, and she had it then. She wasn't the stick in the mud like she is now. I totally agree. And she has hair back then. So. Yeah.
I also agree because again, my brother in the military, and is like when you get women in the military at a certain level, it's like they're trying to push buttons and break rules without people knowing it. You know what I mean?
Right.
They got an attitude.
And it's also written by people who have no knowledge of the military. You know what I mean? Like all these people that are making Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, this military brought up. These people despise the military. They don't like if they were to meet real Marines, they wouldn't want to be in the room with them. You know what I mean? And now these were definitely inventory issues. If you ask me, these are like.
I love 193 though. I mean, again, speaking of Carol Danvers, if I could pick an issue of any comic and make me think of Carol Danvers, it'd be 193, and she's just a side character, but I love this issue.
Yeah. And I love those faces in the corner, the 7 members of the team. And I love the discussion of Falcon being put on the team because he's a minority, This was what
Henry Gyrich, throws him on there just because of that.
Yeah. And how Hawkeye responds to it would make him an alt-right Nazi today. And now Hawkeye's progressive liberal guy hanging out in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. You know what I mean? It's funny. It's like, that's not the Hawkeye that I know. Hawkeye that I know was like pissed off that he was kicked off the Avengers for diversity hire, and then decided, all right, I'm going to go get a job being a security company for a corrupt company and pick up chicks and get a lot of money and drink beer while working.
That's right. He worked for Roxxon and everything, didn't he?
He worked for the not Roxxon, but it might as well. Marvel had these evil corporations. The Brand Corporation. That's where he worked for. No, Cross Technologies. Damian Cross. That's right. Yeah. Avengers 200 is coming up. That's one of the most controversial comics of all time. And I never realized how creepy that comic was until I revisited for my Sunday comic section. Here, I love that vision. Is that so cool? the first Taskmaster over here. I love this too. This was my introduction to Ant-Man. You know,
195, yeah.
yeah, that was my first Ant-Man comic. Even though it was Henry Pym, you know, with his mind blocked, so he lost his memory, so he still thinks he's Ant-Man, and so he doesn't recognize the other Avengers. Yeah, and I remember hearing rumors of Ant-Man, and I remember going, "That's a stupid superhero," but not now. I love Ant-Man.
Oh, I love the Red Ronin stuff.
Yeah, this is so good. There's Jocasta. Yeah, she became like a regular in the Avengers, like a regular secondary character for a while. Look at that. That has like all the art directions on
Dressings,
that.
yeah, the trade dressings on it and everything.
Yeah, that is cool.
What do you want me to? I'll pull up 200 and then we'll stop. What,
Yeah,
what's the? I can't remember what the 200 is. That the one where basically they get rid of Carol Danvers?
yeah. It's really I'm not a politically correct guy in the slightest. Even I'm kind of disturbed by this comic, but Immortus basically roofies her, seduces her like with like no will, and then gets her to give birth to him. It's really and the rest of the Avengers is just like, oh, she looks happy, you know. So and then the next follow up, because I think this was written by Roger Stern, and then the next time we see Carol Danvers is years later in the X-Men annual. I think it's 9 or 10, the first appearance of Rogue, and Carol Danvers is on the San Francisco bridge, and she throws herself off the bridge, committing suicide, and she's rescued by Spider-Woman, and Spider-Woman takes her to the Avengers and everything, and it's dealing with like what happened. You know, Chris Claremont, you know, he was a proto-feminist or whatever, so he wrote like a response to this issue, you know, and it was also the first appearance of Rogue, drawn by Michael Golden. You know, it's such a good comic. But you know, you got to read Avengers 200, and then you got to read that X-Men annual. I think it's 10 or 9, or is it Avengers? No, it's Avengers annual 10. I'm thinking it's Avengers annual 10. You got to read them back to back. They're like bookends. Yeah.
Honestly, to me, the storyline for 200 is basically something out of early 70s sci-fi. It's like there's a lot of weird stuff,
Yeah.
early 70s and the late 60s, I guess, too. But that's what it seems like to me. It's like, yeah, you're pushing the line there, but they did it 20 years earlier with the science fiction all through the movies, right?
And I don't blame Roger Stern. Like, I don't think he hates women, and like I've seen all these articles about it. He was just like, oh, this is a sci-fi trope. What if like this space guy comes and, you know, gives birth to him? Because it's been done in sci-fi stories before. Yeah. I don't know if it was done just as creepy, but yeah, it's kind of. I did a video on it. If anybody looks up Sunday Comics Avengers, you could see I do like 2 hours talking about this particular issue.
And I mean, just go watch things like Zardoz or Barbarella or anything else, and I mean, you'd be equally as disturbed.
Yeah. It's one of the most controversial comics, and it earned it, but it is drawn gloriously. And this is one of those times, like I know you do this, Art. Do you remember where you were when you read this comic?
200? I don't remember when I read that comic now.
I remember going to the 7-Eleven and buying it, and I had it in a bag, a plastic bag, with a couple of other comics. And I remember riding my bicycle home, and these other kids, older kids, came up to me, and I just remember this. So I was going home to read the comics on my bicycle, and they come up to me and like, hey, and I heard this band, and I was like, oh, what's the band? The Sex Pistols. And they're like, oh, okay. And I never heard of them. Like, yeah, they're crazy. They're like the craziest band ever. And then they rode away. So Avengers 200 always reminds me of the Sex Pistols because of that strange conversation by kids that just rode by. But I some memories I'll have to the rest of my life, and that's one of them. Stupid memory.
I always have some books that I never bought because my brothers bought them. Like my oldest brother was buying Avengers at this time. That's where all of my old Avengers come from. So it was probably something that was just sitting around the house.
Yeah, it's beautifully drawn. It's so well drawn, and like the Immortus stuff. But like again, it's it's basically a story of a girl who gets roofied, and then the Avengers just let her go with, the guy that roofied her. Say what you want, psionic powers or whatever, but he even says that he made her susceptible to his advances, with his psionic powers. That's no different to me than Thor using his hammer to threaten a woman. And again, I'm not politically correct in the slightest. And even as a kid, this comic kind of bothered me.
John Byrne, who wrote it? It was Chris Claremont, right? But even there's some things that you got to remember. Again, early '80s, John Byrne, when he re-envisioned the Fantastic Four, it was the fact that Sue Richards, that was like Mr. Fantastic moved into a apartment building or a room in a New York place, I think it was, right? And he was in university. He was going to college, and he was doing his like doctorate. And the people who he rented from had a little girl who was 8 years old who was Sue.
Yes.
That's John Byrne's where they first met, right? He was doing his doctorate, and she was like 8 to 10 years old, and she became enamored with him from that early age. And that you got to, there's a lot
of, I mean, back when Stan and Jack were doing Hank Pym in what was it, Tales of Suspense or Tales, I forget which one it was, but they talk about in the very first appearance of the Wasp, of Janet Van Dyne's first appearance. I have a reprint of it. I don't have that particular issue, but it's Hank Pym as a scientist, and he meets a buddy of his, and the buddy of his is having a problem that needs to be addressed. So he goes over and they're working on it, and he meets Janet, and he says, "What a lovely young girl," and basically says she's like 16 years old. He goes, "She looks so much like my late wife. It's unbearable." And then it goes into what happened to his ex-wife, and then by the end of the issue, she's his, not just like she's his sidekick, but we all know they end up getting married and everything. But it was a 35-year-old, because back then all the scientists were like 35 years old. Never really stated, but I always assumed he was like in his 30s. He's a well-established PhD scientist adventurer, already, widowed, with his 16-year-old girlfriend. That what do they call that? The May-December romances were a big thing in comics at the time. It was Reed and Sue, it was Hank and Janet, and I'm sure there are more that I can't think of. But I mean, it's
Green Lantern.
Did Green Lantern have a young girlfriend too?
Yeah, what's her name? Basically, I can't remember the yellow skin girl.
Oh, Aricia. Yeah, she
yes.
was. They said she was 14, and I remember even at the time they got flack for that. And they're like, no, she's on her planet. A year is 3 years, so she's really 30 or 42. Ooh, they got out of that one pretty cleverly. But yes,
because she looked like an elf, like an actual sort of like ElfQuest elf at the very first, and then she used the power ring to make herself look like a woman, like a human woman.
It's funny because just today, I'm on a construction site working, and a couple of guys got Bluetooth speakers, and everybody listens to classic rock. And what's that song? She's only 17 comes on, and everybody's singing. And I'm just like, does anybody besides me think about how creepy this song is? Like, back in 1978, it was like, hey, things were different. But now it's like, and then I was like, yeah, it is. I have a 17-year-old daughter. Like, the guy turned down the song, Kiss had that song, Christine 16. Paul Stanley. You're like 40 years old when you wrote that song.
That's like me playing Dean Martin. I can't remember the name of the song off the top of my head, but he's basically saying, I have no girlfriend. What do? I stand down on Main Street and I look at the girls going by and think about which one I want.
On the corner, watching all the girls go by.
And it's like, I got, what is like 16, 18-year-old guys in my family, like, that's creepy. I'm going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
It's Dean Martin.
Yeah. I mean, watch any 40s movies. You had Humphrey Bogart, and Lauren Bacall was 18, 19 years old at the time.
They got married.
I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm just saying David Bowie. This is some dark rock and roll trivia or history, but there was an elite British boarding school where, like, royalty and military and politicians and the rich sent their kids, and it was an all girls boarding school, and they pimped out the girls, the administration, and all the rock stars would go there. Jimmy Page had a 14-year-old girlfriend, and there's pictures of them. David Bowie had a young girlfriend, one of the guys from Aerosmith, and this was the 70s, and we're like, those scamps, now it's like, dude, you're going to jail. You know what I mean? I'm not saying it's okay. I'm just saying I remember this stuff from the 70s, guys. I don't need to be canceled over this. I'm fully on the side of it's wrong. But I'm just saying I remember this stuff as a kid, and now you go back and you're like, wait a minute. I like David Bowie, and then you remember some of the shady stuff that these guys did. I'd also like to point out, during this broadcast, I got three backers to bring me to 100. So thank you, everybody. Good. Thank you, everybody. I don't know if it's you guys watching or if it's a coincidence, but either way, thank you, everybody. I got 300 backers on my last, literally at 300 between all three platforms. Turned out to be, my goal is to get 301. So thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, we'll leave it there. I think, John, we've been talking for about an hour and a half, and I still haven't played your trailer. So we'll use your trailer as the outro.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And the link is in the description for the sign-up page for Fade to Blue and for John's Heroic Tales #2 and 1, if you want to get both of them. And I'll leave it at that. Well, let's see. I got to share a screen. You go ahead and talk for a second, John. I got to.
Yeah. I can't wait for Fade to Blue. I look at that art; it's so good, and I know RJ's gonna. I'm not smart enough to write a mystery, so I can't wait to see what you're gonna do with this. I'm kind of. I went into a big phase of detective comics. I've been reading Mystery and all that stuff, so I can't wait for you. I can't wait for this. But anyway.
All right, we're going to play John's trailer, and that's our outro. So I'll say goodbye to everybody, and have a good night. See you all on Saturday.
Bye-bye.